Who have you studied with, and who are your influences in the dog world? Why is my dog capable of killing another dog over a grain of sand? Loose dogs. Is there any dog you haven't been able to help? Are dogs rehabilitable? What do you think about the professional world? Can hyperactive dogs with high energy be trained? Leash handling. How much do the ontogeny and genetics of the father and mother influence behavioral problems? Hello everyone, I'm Alberto from Lobos. Welcome to this first attempt at a podcast where I'm going to answer questions from our followers. We've chosen a place where we can be relatively calm to have this conversation. And we're going to start with some questions that are directly related to each other. The first question we get asked all the time is what book recommendations we have or what we can recommend to interpret the canine language of dogs, to know how to read dogs, or book recommendations that are somehow related to what we do or how we understand the dog world. The second is where I trained. Who have you studied with, and who are your influences in the dog world or your mentors? I come from having a very complicated dog, and I realize that she completely surpasses me in knowledge, skills, and preparation. Way above me. I looked into the different approaches out there to try to help her, but what I found is that there are so many holes in the arguments, so many questions that can't be answered, and it just doesn't work for what I'm trying to achieve, which is to make my dog as happy as possible. And what I decide is not to get contaminated. For a new way of seeing things, or a new approach, or a new methodology, or to avoid always making the same mistakes, you need a perspective that isn't contaminated. So I realized that if I started reading or getting informed, or if I went to train with professionals, the terminology, the basic premises where the questions and conversations come from, that. The questions and the conversations, that. It wasn't going to be what I was looking for. So what I've done is put everything together on my own. In other words, I've started to sit down, I've started to critically analyze situations, and I've gone through many phases. Throughout that whole process, where I'm actively training, I haven't read anything at all. I've never trained with anything at all. Nobody. I don't have any influences. I've never been to any seminars. I've never taken any courses. Absolutely nothing. So when I already have a more or less formed vision, when I have an intuition of how the dog's world works, then I read books. I've never used that to learn, and I've never taken what shapes my view of the canine world today from those books. Instead, I've used them to challenge my perspective. So when I read something, I already had some foundations to say, that's not right, that doesn't add up, that doesn't explain it. It's like, this is similar to what you're saying, sure, but we're not coming from the same place, so the reasons aren't the same. So when I read something, I already had it. A basis on which to say, that is not so, that does not fit, that does not explain, that is why it is similar, that you are also saying this, of course. But we are not coming from the same place, so the reasons are not the same. I may recommend a book to you, you may read things and you may become contaminated by terminology, you may become contaminated by premises on which conversations start, with which I may not necessarily agree. So if you're watching me, and if you like my way of understanding the dog world, if you're drawn to what we do, recommending a book would be totally the opposite of what we've done and would probably just mess with your head. Let's move on to some more specific questions. Loose dogs. Loose dogs is a bit of a tricky topic because we all get carried away by the desire to let our dogs roam free. Everyone wants to walk their dog off leash, and culturally, we all understand that a loose dog is a happy dog. What it's doing as a dog, all that kind of stuff. But for you to be able to let your dog off leash, you need to have some basic skills to make an impact with the dog at a distance, because otherwise, you're just relying on luck. The issue of loose dogs and leash dogs is a matter of social responsibility. And here there are two types of people. Those who don't care about anything else at all, because the only thing that matters is us and our dog. I mean, I'm going to prioritize my desire to let the dog roam free over anything that could happen. Or people who have social responsibility. and understand when it's okay to let their dogs off leash, and when it's not, and they try to minimize the risk of other things happening, especially if they don't have total control. The impact you have on your dog. So, can you go with dogs off leash? Yes. Can you go loose with the dogs you don't know? Well, you can, too. Are you taking a risk? Also, because you're not just depending on yourself, but also on the other dog and the other handler, the other dog. So, I would recommend that if you want to go with dogs off leash, make sure they are dogs you already know and that you have enough communication and trust with their handlers to say, hey, grab your dog at a certain point, because this is getting out of hand. And there is no need to walk the dog loose if the dog does not know how to manage its own state, because just by walking loose it will not be happier or more of a dog if you do not know how to read it and do not know how to identify it. And there are many times when spending too much time off leash can even be counterproductive for them if they can't make that switch or change in state once they're caught. Can you improve a lack of socialization in an adult dog? Definitely yes. You can improve the lack of socialization in all dogs, regardless of their age or where they are at. There is a caveat, which is a but. Not all dogs can be brought to the same point. This is true for the lack of socialization in an adult dog. This is directly related to another question, which is, can all dogs live in a group? It's exactly the same. All dogs can live in groups because it is part of their design and genetic coding. But that doesn't mean all dogs are going to live better in a group. Living in a group, as I understand the canine world, since there are no hierarchies or social structures of wild animals, and although you can perceive them as close because it really is a timeline, it is a subspecies, and they are very close, the impact of the human being is as brutal as artificial intelligence. This didn't exist, and suddenly you exist, and you exist with a purpose, which is to be useful or to connect, or however you want to put it, for humans. What that means is that you have the abilities, but you don't have any kind of value, whether it's evolutionary, adaptive, or survival-related, in doing so. It's about being useful or connecting, or whatever you want to call it, for humans. What that means is that you have the abilities, but you don't have any kind of value, whether it's evolutionary, adaptive, or survival-related, in doing so. Can you be in a group? Yes. Do you have to be in a group to survive, or to be better, or to be happier, or to have a greater sense of well-being? Not necessarily. Can a dog reach its highest level of well-being being solely with a human? Yes, it can. That's my feeling. My intuition is that of course they can, because their survival, their design, and their genetic modification today respond to their connection with humans, who are the ones ensuring their survival. Food is what provides the capabilities for reproduction or not. So, can they live in a group? Of course, because they have all the genetic capabilities for it. Is it essential for their survival and well-being? Not necessarily. If you know how to do it and can share space, then yes. And if not, that's okay, as long as the relationship with the human is healthy and good. Another question. All dogs are rehabilitable. It might be that a professional with a high level of skills and abilities can take a dog to a point where it's functional, but maybe not, for sure. With a high level of skills and abilities can bring a dog to a point where it is functional, but maybe not, for sure. There's a percentage of dogs that can't live in that kind of bubble they need to live in with their guides. With their guides. So, are all of them rehabilitable? Almost all of them. In the ideal context, but that ideal context can't always be created or offered. Is there any dog you haven't been able to help? Sure, there are dogs that I haven't been able to help because they catch me at a point in my learning and training curve. That was really off. Maybe nowadays I would have the ability to help them. And then there are dogs that come to see me in sessions. That was at a point that was really off. That maybe nowadays I would have the ability to help them. And then there are dogs that come to see me in sessions with guides where I won't be able to help the dog if I can't raise the level of knowledge. Boost skills to aid dog. I won't be able to help the dog if I can't raise the level of knowledge and skills in the guides, and skills in the guides. And There are people I've seen with complicated dogs who weren't going to be close by. I've communicated that to them, and I've offered options. And of course, with those dogs, I've offered them options. And of course, in those dogs, I have been able to help in real time, once they have been with me, but once they are not with me, I can no longer do anything. So, I count those dogs internally as dogs I haven't been able to help, even though I've had an impact on them when I've worked with them. When I've touched them. I'm going to give you an example so you can understand why this is complicated as a professional. The feeling that a dog you're working with has to leave because it's not yours, because it has to go, because you're not Batman. You can't help every dog, and you can't keep every dog because that would be unrealistic. So, I'm going to give you an example of something that happened to illustrate the difficulties I sometimes face. The difficulties I sometimes face. I have a family, a father, a mother, and an 8-year-old kid contact me. They don't follow me. They're from Madrid. They're going to Valencia. And in Valencia, they're at a campsite. And at the campsite, their dog has problems. And someone who's camping with them says, "Look, I don't know you, but I follow a guy named Alberto from Lobos. And I think I can help you." So they contact me. And I try to filter out people who don't know me beforehand from my sessions, meaning I try not to take recommendations. I make the video call before scheduling a session with them. Well, so I was initially talking to the mom, and when I call, it's the dad who picks up the video call. I ask where the mom is, and he tells me she's in the room with their daughter because a Malinois bites his arms, making it hard to talk. About a year old, I think, biting his arms constantly, and the guy can't talk to me because he's trying to get the dog off him. He's completely overwhelmed. I had a moment of emotional weakness there because I see that, and naturally, I want to help. I had a moment of emotional weakness, because I see that and naturally I want to help. And I didn't strictly follow the filters I usually apply. So I let them come to the session, and when they show up for the session, the kid was covered in bites and bruises everywhere, and so were they. They had, in the mother's words, 5 or 6 Malinois. So they knew a lot about dogs, and they knew a lot about Malinois. And I don't know, they explained why this particular individual had turned out to be such a handful because they knew a lot about dogs, and they knew a lot about Malinois. So when we start the session, the dog is indeed at a high point. It's a dog that, as told, when they're walking loose in the mountains or anywhere, the dog behaves well until one of them separates. And when one of them separates, the dog herds them and bites them. The dog behaves well until one of them separates. And when one of them separates, the dog herds them and bites them to bring them back together. This type of aggression and biting also happens at home. This type of aggression and biting also happens at home. And I repeat, an 8-year-old kid with 10 to 12 bites, not excessively strong, but noticeable, bruised. And the parents too. And after 20 minutes, nobody's listening to me, they're all in their own world. I and the dog to the dad, tell him to grab it by the collar and keep it close to him. Because the daughter is obviously bored, and can't stop moving and playing with rocks on the ground. And every time she starts playing with a rock, what happens is the dog jumps at her. So I tell the dad, hold the dog by the harness and the collar so it doesn't lunge, and please tell the kid to stop playing. It lunges at her. Then I tell the father, hold the dog by the harness you are wearing and the collar so that it does not lunge, and please tell the puppy to stop playing. Mirror the dog like that because every time she does, it's going to jump. And I repeat, we're not just sitting on a park bench. We agreed to meet for coffee, and I'm telling you what you need to do with your daughter. You have come to a session to gain something positive. Listen to the professional who's here to provide maximum information from experience. 2. In this case, listen to the professional who's not here to babysit, but to give you as much information as possible from the experience. But they don't do anything from the experience. but they don't do anything. So, by the fourth time, when the kid starts playing, the dog almost gets the dad's leg while he's scratching his ear, and I have to be the one to grab it. So I tell them that we're stopping the session, that the kid shouldn't be present for the things I'm about to say. So from now on, please take her to the caravan, because they came in a caravan. Suddenly, the mom has an ego trip, because I told her what she needs to do in front of her daughter. But you're in my house, and in my house, your dog is not going to bite your daughter because I'm not going to tolerate it. I don't care how you see life. So the mom takes her away, and when she comes back in a state where she starts crying, and before she starts telling me too much. Tell that I don't see them ready to have this dog. I say I don't see you being able to handle it. I don't care what you learn here. I don't care about the dog's potential. I don't care. I say I don't see them prepared to be able to have this dog. The only way, in my opinion, that you can resolve this situation is by being a dog professional first, before being a mechanic, before being a nurse, before being a partner, and before being a parent. Solve this situation. It's about being a dog professional, before being a mechanic, before being a nurse, before being a partner, and before being a parent. Because if you are not canine professionals with this dog in the situation you are in, before all that, you will not be able to work as a mechanic, or as a nurse, or as a father, or as a partner, or as a mother, or as a couple, because your life will be dependent on your dog not eating your daughter or eating her. That the dog might one day hurt someone or not. So, as regular folks, you're not prepared for this. Only if you make the other decision do I understand that you'll be able to. So I suggest that I take the dog as an option. Or that they make the decision to live in a very specific way, but I just didn't see them as capable. In the conversation, the first reaction is denial and indignation. She'd never give up the dog. She'd only give it up under specific conditions, and she questions if my conditions are best if she lets me have it. That's when I lose it. She would never give up the dog. She would only do it under very specific conditions. And how does she know if the conditions I'm going to provide for the dog are the best ones if she were to let me have it? That's when I just lose it. Because she's questioning my professionalism in my own home, and it's my fault for not having gone through the proper filters. And what happens is that she starts to consider the option of giving me the dog. And her husband has a moment of masculinity and fatherhood in this case. So he says no, that he's going to put on his cape, that he's going to hop on his horse with his sword, and that he's going to dedicate himself solely and exclusively to this so the dog can improve. I question it, but I question it. Because I need to know in that moment if it's for real or not, or if this is the first time you're going to challenge his abilities. He's going to back down. So he tells me that yes, he's going to do everything he can, so I offer him to put him, a training professional in Madrid for free for as long as he wants and can afford. In other words, if with this guy who is in training, but is a professional, you want to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the next 2 months. In training, but as a professional. You want to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the next 2 months. I'm going to make it easy for you for free. I'll take care of it. With conditions, and the conditions are that if I have the feeling, we're going to create a follow-up group where both the other guy and you all are going to keep me updated continuously on everything you do. If I feel like you're not doing everything you can, I'll pull you out. If I get the feeling that you're not doing everything you can, I take you away to this guy. And I don't want you to write to me or tell me anything again, even if your dog ends up hurting your daughter. Because I can't do any more. I'm offering you me keeping the dog, which isn't something I do too often, but in this case, because the kid was 8 years old and was giving me. I offer you a professional 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you don't get the benefit that I think you should be getting out of this situation that I'm offering you, I'll take it away from you. And if your dog hurts your daughter, or takes off your arm, or kills your mother-in-law, don't call me, because I'm already doing everything I can, and you guys definitely aren't. Because I'm already doing everything I can, and you guys definitely aren't. So they agree. And 2 weeks later, obviously, I had to take Miguel's assistants away in this case, who was working with them with very good results. This is a case of a dog that I consider I haven't been able to help. And I definitely think about him, not them. Several times a month. All the dogs that I feel I haven't been able to help. For whatever reason. They live with me continuously. And they show up or present themselves at different times, but they're all there. Of course, there have been dogs that I haven't been able to help. Leash handling. I'm going to tell you something that seems to me a monumental nonsense of people who say they dedicate themselves to this world. When they say things like super convinced that the walk is for your dog, the walk isn't yours. And this is one of the biggest absurdities I've heard in the professional dog world. Because the walk is for both of them. This is a human-canine duo. And this is what the movie is about, what it all comes down to, having the ability as a duo, as an entity made up of two parts, to enjoy life as much as possible, achieving the greatest well-being possible. So, when you understand your dog as a separate being from you and the walk is theirs and not yours, that conceptually seems like nonsense to me. And what is happening? A balanced dog, in a moment of balance, synchronization, and connection with the human, the dog walks beside you, but walks beside you as a manifestation of being as connected as possible. That doesn't mean that they're going to be by your side all the time. As a manifestation of being as connected as possible. That doesn't mean they're going to be by your side all the time. Of course, there are moments when they're 30 meters away and they're still balanced, but you have to know how to understand those moments. He stays close and by your side by his own choice. Because he understands that the world works and is experienced much better near the human in that state than on his own, for sure. Especially if he doesn't know how to create the state to experience the world in a way that's positive enough for him, the feeling. Positive enough for him. Experiences. And its visual impact it has from the outside, seeing us walk with 30 or 40 dogs off-leash. We're not running, dogs walk. With us. Off-leash happens when the dog is balanced and connected with the human. We emulate that with the leash. We minimize interference, avoid constant signals, and save impactful leash moments. And what we're trying to emulate, I repeat, is that with the leash. We try to create the least interference possible, not to be constantly trying to signal things with our hands or the leash, and to save those moments when you really need to make an impact with the leash. To those that are really necessary. I repeat, don't be there all the time. Trying to actively communicate with the leash. Try to create the least interference possible, and when you really need to make an impact at a certain moment, do it, but keep it as brief as possible. That broad brush. How I understand the leash. What do you think about the professional world? Dog world these days. I think we're at a moment. Not just with dogs, but socioculturally, we're at a point where there is an indigestion of misunderstood well-being. There is an excess of toxic positivity. We're all diving in, trying to navigate an ocean of subjective opinions where everyone thinks that just because they have an opinion, your opinion deserves the same value that the rest when I don't think that's true. Informed opinions should carry more weight than uninformed ones, especially in professional fields where it's tangible. Uninformed especially in professional disciplines, where it is tangible. The level of impact that a movie you play in your head as compared to what someone who actually knows what they're talking about can tell you. Opinions can't hold the same weight, so all of that creates a situation where we're really lost. There are things that are. We are really lost. There are things that are just so obvious, so common sense. So obvious. So common sense. If there's something that you, as a civilian, are experiencing, like someone tells you that to solve this problem you have to do this, and you see that this isn't working. I mean, it's crystal clear that it's not working with your dog. You've tried it 100,000 times, and with 200 people. And the professional keeps insisting that this is what needs to be done. 1. If they don't show you and don't demonstrate how to do it with what they're telling you. And still, they're telling you. It seems incredible to me the confidence that some people have to continue regurgitating certain things. And so for me there are only two options. 1. Either the professional at that moment is regurgitating something they think they know, but both the civilian who's paying for it and they themselves can see it's not having any effect. Or they just don't see it, and that makes me think. Or 2, they do see it and are making a conscious decision to ignore it, to keep going. Or 2, they see it and are making a conscious decision to ignore it, to keep going. Loaded with reason, which also makes me think. You all know what kind of things I'm talking about. And then, this is a profession that's not regulated. This is like the Wild West. Anyone can come here, and there will be people who know us since we started on social media and think, where did these people come from? We all have those abilities and opportunities where, since nothing is regulated and anyone can come in, and think, well, where did these people come from? Let's include that because we all have those abilities and opportunities where, since nothing is regulated and it seems like anyone who comes here can get into this, there's a lot of professional intrusion from people who have no experience, no knowledge, and can't really provide any real value to the professional world. You can dedicate yourself to this. Well, there's a lot of professional intrusion from people who have no experience, no knowledge, and can't really provide any real value to the professional world. So, what's going on? People with dogs who prefer them over their jobs can easily start sharing unverified information. Doesn't feel like continuing with their current job because they want to change their life. And he likes dogs more. Then you have the opportunity to record yourself and start regurgitating information that you have not had the experience of checking for yourself. That aren't based on anything at all. You don't show any work, but you focus on telling people what to do. The canine world is full of those, and it is full of those with 200 followers, with 23,000 followers, and with 280,000 followers, and with 1 million followers. Don't think that the number of followers you may have depending on the type of profile you have is directly related to your real ability to have an impact on dogs, or to know what you're talking about, or your ability to help. It just doesn't work that way. That's my biggest concern. My biggest concern and frustration with the professional world these days, because there are a lot of people who really know their stuff in specific areas, like training. There are folks who are experts in training at a very, very high level, obviously. There are professionals who excel in agility, bike joring, mushing, and specific activities. Very high, but overall, that's what I was saying. That's my feeling about how the dog world is these days. Why does my dog absolutely hate certain dogs, especially if they're neighbors on the street? The definition. The idea of a dog hating another dog is totally human. The projection that one dog hates another is completely human, although at some point, every time your dog sees another dog, he goes crazy. The projection of hate is totally yours. You're asking, what? Well, what I do is answer. How? Things happen. Look, this kind of question, the whys, is really complicated because they don't necessarily have an end. Because if it doesn't have an end, and you can't determine the truth of something in itself, what you need to focus on is the usefulness of that something. So, if the why is throwing you off, the best thing to do is to focus on how it happens. Dog reacts. It's about how. The fact that my dog behaves this way every time it sees a certain stimulus, interacts with a certain stimulus, and how all those intermediate steps happen, not why it happens. And that's directly related to another question, which is why my dog is capable of killing another dog over a piece of kibble. It's not about why it's capable. The why in this case, and in most cases, is because it's a possibility, and everything that is a possibility falls within the range of what is natural. So, what does that mean? That given certain types of circumstances, or contexts, everything that can happen will happen. So, it's not about why my dog can kill another dog over a piece of kibble, it's because it has the capacity to do so. And if all the circumstances are in place for that to happen, it's going to happen. I repeat, what we should focus on in this case is the how does it all happen? How does it happen that a dog is given a stimulus such as food in front of another dog? What circumstances are there that cause this type of thing to happen? How does what happens occur? Not why what happens occurs. How much do the ontogeny and genetics of the father and mother influence behavioral problems? Ontogeny is about changes at the cellular level, and those cellular changes affect the genetic coding of an individual, which comes from the father and mother, so it's inevitable and has an impact. What happens is that, like in humans, it's not determinative. Not everything depends on genetic coding. It has an impact because what happens is that, like in humans, it's not determinative. Not everything depends on genetic coding. It has an impact in the sense that life experience, and this is broadly known as epigenetics, can't change your genetic coding, but it does have the ability to activate some genes and not others. And that activation, or deactivation of genes, has an impact on how the individual relates to the world, but it's also inheritable. Of course, there will be cases where genetics has a much more determining value than another, but very complicated. Attribute something solely to genetics. For hyperactive dogs that have a lot of energy, can training be used? Training can always be used as long as people want to. I've never said that training shouldn't be done. I've never said that I'm against training. I don't practice training. I don't do any obedience training. I don't use commands, nor do I condition behaviors or modify behaviors. But people can do whatever they want. I have no problem with obedience training as long as people understand what it is. And what it is trying to condition behaviors so that they happen on their own will, at a moment when they would never occur naturally. So, when you want, you tell your dog to sit, and the dog sits. When you want, you tell your dog to lie down, and your dog lies down. And when you call your dog, it comes. And when all that kind of stuff happens, I have no problem with any of that. But don't think that this is related to the animal's well-being. Because it's not. So, can it be used? Of course. And it can be used in the same way that I'm going to answer the next question, which is dog sports, agility, disc dog, mantrailing, etc. Which dogs can handle it? You can allow whatever you want as long as you're not having a negative impact on the dog's overall well-being. So, there are definitely dogs that can handle any kind of sport or high-intensity activity because it has no negative impact on them. In fact, it has a positive effect. But there are many dogs, a whole lot of dogs, that doing an activity of prolonged intensity without any knowledge of how to disconnect it afterward, well, it's going to have negative effects on the dog, and that's a reality. That is, what capacity does your dog have to manage everything you are experiencing in a positive way or without it having a negative impact? So do whatever you want, of course. I share my actions and reasons. Focus on the dog's well-being through play and understanding activities and knowing your dog. Of those decisions we're making, when all the decisions we're making are to help the dog achieve the best possible well-being, and sometimes that means playing. And sometimes it's about not playing, other times it's about knowing what it means to play, other times it's about knowing how to understand the activities, and it's about knowing your dog. Your dog, and you don't have metrics to know your dog so that they are real. You are not seeing what is bad for him and what is great for him. Many people are asking me about my opinion when it comes to telepathy and animal communication. I'm not going to go into this in depth right now, but not because I find it complicated or that I think. My basic point of view. In this regard, it is very similar to the flat earther, and I was very specific recently about what I thought of that in relation to the dog world as well. So, it's not that I don't want to talk, because I don't consider it a professional branch within the canine world. So, I feel completely free to express my public opinion on it. I want to bring a bit more verified and first-hand information before diving deeper into the topic. And when we do, we will dedicate a little more exclusive and undivided attention to the topic because surely it definitely deserves it. So, that's it. This has been the first attempt at a podcast-only approach to answering questions from our followers. I felt pretty comfortable. I felt like talking in a bit more of an informal tone, and not necessarily as educational as I usually do. I hope you liked it, and we're going to try to keep this format once a month. So, that's it. Once a month. So, that's it. If you liked it, I'm looking forward to your questions for the next video.